Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are Group 4 from English Literature A, and in this opportunity, we are going to present our material about words and sentences. Our presentation today will be divided into some subtopics, but before we continue our explanation, let me as a moderator introduce my group members first. The first speaker is Nuranisa Azahra. The second speaker is Muhammad Edi Chaisar. The third speaker is Mirna Devi Ramlan. The fourth speaker is Sri Hastuti. The fifth speaker is Miris Kawanti Kadir. And the last speaker is Firmansyah Salimin. Okay, let's continue our explanation for the first material about morphological analysis will be delivered by Nuranisa Azahra. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Rizka. And now I want to explain about a morphological analysis. A morphological analysis is a study about morphemes and how to combine morphemes to a word. In morphology, we are going to learn about the detail of the structure of word, the structure of word, affix, and analysis. While understanding of the small is part of morpheme words and meaning of their own. Morpheme is divided into two parts, pre-morpheme and bound morpheme. Pre-morpheme is independent or can stand alone as a word, while the bound morpheme cannot stand alone as a word. Bound morpheme must always be combined with another morpheme to be word. Addition of a morpheme in a word changes the meaning of the word. In the study of morphology, the cover in morphology is the difference between lexical items and words. Morpheme and morphology, monomorpheme and polymorphemic, allomorph, root, base, stem of a word, the process of inflection, all of the cover that exist in the derivation, blending, and confounding. Morphology is the identification, analysis, and description of the structure of a given language, morpheme, and other linguistic units, such as root words, affix, part of speech, intonation, stress, or implied context. Words in a lexicon are the subject matter of lexicology.
Okay, now we move to the second speaker. Will be delivered by Muhammad Edi. Time is yours.
Okay, so thanks, moderator, for giving me the chance to continue our group's discussion. So I'm going to talk about how morphemes are arranged. There are two interrelated aspects of morpheme arrangement. First, order and placement of affixes, and derivation and inflection of words. Order and placement of affixes. Affixes are categorized by where they attach to base morphemes. For English, this is pretty straightforward. Let's take a moment to survey some of the range of possible ways that affixes can attach to bases. Prefixes are bound morphemes that attach at the beginnings of base forms. An example from English is the un of unhelpful. Suffixes are bound morphemes that attach at the ends of base forms. Examples from English include the S of the hats and the ing of singing and the air of helper and so on. Infixes are bound morphemes that are inserted into the middle of base forms. Infixes are rare in English, but one good example of something that probably qualifies is the word bloody, as in absolutely. Circumfixes are bound morphemes that attach simultaneously to both the beginning and the end of a base form. For example, enlighten and unacceptable. Reduplication is a process that creates an affix from part of an existing base forms and then attaches that affix to the base form. Reduplicated bits can be prefixed, suffixed, or infixed. For example, okidoki and bye-bye. Interweaving. Interweaving is a process in which morphemes are interspersed within base forms. Semitic languages such as Arabic and Hebrew use this process, and they generally use roots as base forms. Fermental is a process in which morphemes blend into one another. Example includes the blending of breakfast and lunch into brunch. Hierarchy. We should also note that every language has a specific order in which affixes can be attached. Nowadays, this is referred to as hierarchy. Knowing the hierarchical relationship among the affixes of a language will keep us from attaching morphemes in the wrong order and creating bizarre words. In English, suffixes are generally added before prefixes, like helpful, before we can create unhelpful. And the last is about derivation and inflection. Derivation means the transformation of a word from a one word class into one another, while inflection means a change in some aspects like case, number, gender, and tense within a word class like conjugation. Derivation is the process of creating new words. Inflection is the process of modifying existing words. Derivation example is child, to childhood, and to childish. An inflection example is child, children, and childs. And I think that's all for my topic. I'll give it to the moderator.
Okay, thank you for your explanation. Now we move to the third speaker. Will be delivered by Mirna Devi Ramlan. Time is yours.
Okay, next material is about allomorph. An allomorph is any of a different form of a morpheme. It is a word that has different sound but doesn't change the meaning. This can be a different pronunciation or different spelling when the same meaning unit like past for past tense or plural has more than one sound form. There are four kinds of allomorph. First, additive allomorph. Additive allomorph is used to show some difference in meaning by adding something to a word, such as the past tense form of most English verb is formed by adding suffix ed, which can be pronounced as either the sounds, or ed. For example, as you can see in the slide, next kind of allomorph is replacive allomorph. To signify some difference in meaning, a sound is used to replace another sound in a word. For example, the E sound in drink is replaced by the A sound in drink to signal the simple past. Next, is suppletive allomorph. It is a word that has the same meaning, but the word is changed totally. For example, poor. By adding the suppletive allomorph of the, it becomes bad. And another example is good. Good, by adding the suppletive allomorph, it becomes best. And the last kind of allomorph is zero allomorph, a word that has no change. There is no change in the shape of a word, though some difference meaning is identified. For example, the past tense form of hurt, is formed by adding the zero allomorph of the, and it still becomes hurt. And another example for plural, the word ship. Although it is adding a zero allomorph, the result will still remain the same. I think that's all the explanation about allomorph. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your explanation. Now we move to the fourth speaker will be delivered by Sri Hastuti. It's about syntax analysis. Time is yours.
Okay, about syntax analysis. Syntax is a fundamental part of writing language. Diction defines the style of written or spoken language, representing the choice a speaker or writer makes within the rules of grammar and syntax sets the rules for using words, phrase, clause, and punctuation specifically to form sentence. Okay, let's talk about sentence structure example. Fundamentally, syntax is about structure. The rules of syntax exist to make sentence clear and consistent. There are a variety of common syntactical mistakes and all are easy to fix once a writer knows what they're doing wrong. Is another example of that. Incorrect. Incorrect is about looking over Charlie's exam. Several mistakes become evident immediately. Next, correct. Correct is about looking over Charlie's exam. The teacher noticed several mistakes. And next, punctuation example. Another set of common mistakes have to do with punctuation. Incorrect and correct. Incorrect. This house is dusty, fifty, and stinky. And correct. This house is dusty, filthy, and stinky. Okay, next. Word choice example. There's also the syntactical question of word choice. This is the area in which the rules of syntax offer the most leeway and consequently perhaps the easiest area in which to make mistakes. Incorrect, to the movies we are going, and correct, we are going to the movies. The issue here is outdated phrasing by the rules of syntax. To the movies we are going isn't technically wrong. It's just archaic. Okay. Next step in syntactic analysis. When you analyze a sentence with the tools of traditional grammar, you process in the following 6 steps. The is segmentation. Segmentation 1 is about identify clause boundaries and word boundaries. Next, classification 1 determine part of speech. The next, segmentation 2 is about identify constituents, and the classification 2 determine the syntactic categories for the constituents, determine the grammatical, and then the next and the last determine the grammatical function of the constituents. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your explanation. Now we move to the fifth speaker. Will be delivered by myself. Okay. How syntactic units are arranged. There is different pattern in different language, even in different varieties of a language. Every language seems to have substitution frames for subject, object, and verbs. Syntax in order or arrangement of words and phrases to form proper sentences. The most basic syntax follows as subject, verb, and object. The real joy in syntax comes with the ability to compose sentences in a variety of different ways. We can rearrange adjectives and adverbs, insert phrases, and more. Let's take a look at the syntax in writing examples. We can see in the slide there are two examples here. First is the example of simple sentence. I enjoy college. Work pays the bills. I is subject, enjoy is verb, and college is object. And then the example of complex sentence. Even though it's ridiculously expensive, I enjoy college. And then in the south of Florida, hurricanes are scary. Next slide, please. Okay, now ambiguity and other difficulty. There are some ways of classifying ambiguity. Harford and Hesley in 1983 grouped ambiguity into two, lexical and structural ambiguity, and Cass in 1992 categorizes ambiguity into three levels. There are lexical ambiguity, surface structure ambiguity, and deep or underlying structure ambiguity. Here in the slide, we can see some common examples of ambiguity. For example, a good life depends on the liver. Liver may be an organ or simply a living person. The second example is each of us saw her dog. It is not clear whether the word duck refers to an action of ducking or a duck that is bird. So ambiguity can be interpreted into two different interpretation or more. That's all from me. Now we move to the last speaker will be delivered by Firmansyah Samin. Time is yours.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about kinds of grammars. Up until the beginning of the 19th century, most grammars were perspective grammars are designed to serve as models of proper speech. They tell you how you should speak. They determine what is good grammar and what is bad grammar. By the late 18,000, American anthropologists such as Franz Boas, working with Native American language, began to develop a new approach to learning and describing language. It is descriptive grammar. Descriptive grammars do not attempt to tell you what is good or bad grammar, except in the context of how people use the language. If it seems acceptable for English speakers to say to boldly go, then the task of a descriptive grammar is to explain the patterning that makes this statement possible. But descriptive grammars have some limitations too. One of those limitations is that descriptive linguistic approach expects you to limit your analysis to the language example that you actually hear native speaker using. If a native speaker uses a particular sentence construction, then you can include it in the grammar. Analyzing sentences this way to discover their deep structures and explain how their surface structures are generated seems clear enough, and it is an intriguing way to produce until you realize that in order to do this sort of analysis with any success, you need to be a native speaker of the language that you are analyzing. So for anthropologists and linguistic anthropologists who need to learn unfamiliar language in file situation, the generative approach to grammar is somewhat less useful than descriptive approach. That's all for me.
Okay, so the conclusion of our presentation, is using linguistic anthropology to learn a new language means learning how to discover and analyze word or morphology as well as phrase and sentences or syntax. It is found that morphology and syntax has significant roles in reading comprehension, formation of phrase, clauses, and sentences. So that's all from our group. We hope that our presentation today will bring benefit for all people that watch this video. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.